Jay here of Stretford Paddock. This is a one-on-one interview. Joining us is Ben Jacobs, a senior reporter from Give Me Sport and a friend of the channel. Ben, how's it going? It's good to chat to you. I think it's the first time you've actually spoken on an interview, so it's good to finally have a chat.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Happy New Year to everybody, and let's hope that it's a successful one for everyone listening and, more importantly, for Manchester United.
Well, let's hope we can build on that epic win over Southampton. That relegation 6-pointer, I think you could say. Obviously, we're in the January transfer window. Loads of transfer news to speak about that you've been covering as well. I want to talk a little bit about Alejandro Garnacho. There's rumours, reports that he could be going to Napoli. There's reports that a bid has been sort of rejected. Other reports that I think Atletico are looking. What's the latest with Alejandro Garnacho as far as you understand it? And, you know, where do you think he's going to end up?
Yeah, he may not end up anywhere. That's the first thing to say. So as I reported yesterday, we're not in a Marcus Rashford type territory here, or even Antony. Manchester United are not desperate to sell. They're not pushing an exit. They're not transfer listing the player. It's just the reality of the fact that he's come through Manchester United's academy and is that pure profit, the things I know people hate hearing about, but Jim Ratcliffe and his team, plus the Glazers, will have to think about this in financial terms if the right offer arrives. But if it doesn't, it will be business as usual, which is why Garnacho is still playing for Manchester United. So there may be opportunism here. The reality is that Napoli have some money because Kvaratskhelia has gone off to PSG. That medical at the time of recording is taking place, and that package is 70 million euros plus add-ons, taking the total package somewhere near 80 million euros. And what Manchester United are saying to Napoli, who kind of have Garnacho as a dream target, is if you want him, then the valuation should not be too dissimilar from Kvaratskhelia. And therefore 70 million euros or more is necessary. Otherwise, Manchester United will not feel the need to sell. So nothing cut price. I'm told that Napoli, in approaches to Manchester United, have a valuation significantly less than that, somewhere between 40 and 50 million euros. And the bottom line is Manchester United are not going to do business on those terms. So it reminds me a little bit of Mark Gay last summer, where Palace were very genuine. We're not selling unless you meet this 70 million or more price tag. I suppose Everton did the same with Jared Branthwaite to Manchester United as well. And that's the kind of category we're in at the moment, where Manchester United are not planning for a sale, but if their valuation above market value, you could argue, is met, then they might consider it because it could be a deal that suits all parties. So now the ball is in Napoli's court. Are they going to increase an offer, whether formal or verbal, by 20, 30, 40 million? And if so, spending that Kvaratskhelia fee, then there may be a possibility that Garnacho is sold. But it will be a reluctant sale, and it's certainly not one that Manchester United are pushing for.
You say there about, you know, Napoli perhaps increasing it by 20, 30 million or whatever. Do you think there's a figure there? Do you think there is a sort of a figure where this deal gets done? Or do you think it's just sort of, you know, it depends. It depends on what the offer is. There's no sort of set figure in stone where that is the golden sort of value that Manchester United have?
Well, it won't be less than 70 million euros. When you don't want to lose a player, you don't necessarily set a specific price tag. You turn suitors away and hope that they go up and up and up. And then if you have a private number and it's met, you facilitate a sale. And this is kind of what Brighton do with every transfer, but certainly Moises Caicedo to Chelsea at 115 million. Everyone was speculating over numbers. Brighton just sat there, dragged it on, let Chelsea keep bidding because there was urgency, and eventually that deal got done. I think Manchester United, from what sources tell me, would not sell Garnacho for under 70 million euros. But the reality is that it's not just number, it's structure. So there's no point in going to 80 million euros higher than some of the numbers out there if that extra 10 million in add-ons is not gettable, or if in reaching 80 million euros the payment terms are not preferable. So Manchester United want a ballpark of 70 million euros or more, and then if Napoli come in and around that valuation, they'll discuss the structure. And it may be that if more is in the guaranteed fee, Manchester United become a bit more flexible. It may be that if the add-ons are relatively easy to get, they drop the amount of guaranteed fee that they're looking for. But ballpark, €70 million. And if anything is significantly south of that, then I don't expect Manchester United to engage in a meaningful conversation.
Do you feel that the player would be willing to move from Manchester United? Because looking at Garnacho, even watching him against Southampton, there's times when he doesn't quite seem as happy, if you will, as he has done. I don't want to be too sort of analytical about body language, because I know that doesn't always tell us a full story, but I just get the sense with Garnacho, he isn't completely happy at Manchester United at the minute. Do you think he would be open to a move?
I think he'd be open to a move, and Napoli's a great club with a rich history, and they're doing well at the moment as well in Serie A. So there's a lot to like. And also, for a player, the pitch sometimes can be simpler when you're at a big club, lots of competition, new manager, instability, not where they want to be in the league table. And we know, therefore, that between now and summer, there's going to be a lot of change at Manchester United. So every player, not just Garnacho, is wondering, am I going to be a regular under this manager? Is the form going to turn around? Who are they going to back Manchester United's football team with in the next two transfer windows? And that runs through your mind. And then when another club comes along and says, we want you, if we're going to get you, we're going to have to pay a massive amount of money. And because of the player that's just left Napoli and Kvaratskhelia, it means that there's a clear void which would suit Garnacho. So that will be a factor, I think. I'm not aware that he desperately wants to leave. I'm not aware that the player's been told, like I said in my first answer, he's in any way surplus to requirements. So it would be a reluctant sale. And I think you're absolutely right. We can't read too much into the body language. But the reality of the situation is that if the valuation is met and it's a high one, then Garnacho would have a big decision to make. And the advantage that Napoli could have is they've got a very clear pitch. We've lost a superstar. We want to bring you in as a superstar. And there's a clear gap in our starting 11 for you to play every single week. And then it would be up to the player to decide. But we're not there yet.
No, certainly not. One player who looks sort of closer to the exit door is Marcus Rashford. We've heard reports, and I think you've been covering this as well, about the likes of maybe AC Milan, perhaps Dortmund. There doesn't seem to be anything yet as concrete in terms of where he's going to end up. What's your understanding of the Marcus Rashford situation? Because obviously he's not even in the squad anymore. It's sort of a given that it's not even a surprise when he's no longer picked. And you wouldn't have thought saying that a month or so ago. So where do you think Marcus Rashford is going to end up this summer? Oh, sorry, I think this window, I should say, not this summer, but this January. I presume it's going to be. Yeah, no, I think I'd be very surprised if it takes till the summer for him to move. Where do you think he'll go in January?
The situation with Rashford can kind of be broken down into two different areas. One is he's not playing, but at this stage with an active window, I don't think that we can read game after game after game of Rashford not getting minutes as escalating the situation. I think it's just very normal for clubs when they realise that their player is in talks and could leave to protect the asset. Because the last thing that you want to do is bring him back into the fold, knowing that a move could be imminent, and then find that the player picks up an injury and it scuppers that, because that's counterproductive for all parties. So with every game that Rashford's not involved, it feels more like asset protection than necessarily that he hasn't made amends, or Amorim and Rashford haven't spoken, or Amorim and Rashford haven't found a way to have an amicable relationship. And I don't think this is personal, and I don't think that this is getting nasty or anything like that. Amorim is just coming in and setting the tone regarding football culture. And with Rashford and any other player, he wants to make sure that all the little things that build up to a match day are done right. So Rashford will know if he stays at Manchester United, which is one possibility, he can still be galvanised by a high bar that's been set for everything on the football side. But I'm not aware that this is bleeding into anything personal between player and manager, or player and club. And I think that's also shown by the fact that Garnacho was removed from the matchday squad, Malacia was removed from the matchday squad. Amorim seems to be rotating and sending messages and challenges to a variety of players. So the first question people always ask is, he's not in the squad, he's not in the squad again, he's not in the squad a third time, and now it's several games. So surely that means the move is imminent. But I think there is that aspect of asset protection. And then as a follow-on to that, I'm told that this could still drag on a little bit. So we might have to be patient with the Rashford situation. At the time of recording, you have two clubs in particular in Milan and Dortmund, and they are both pushing for Rashford. With Milan, they have to make a decision in this window between Rashford and Kyle Walker, or they have to pre-agree Walker and sign Rashford now, because specific to Serie A post-Brexit, you can only sign one English player per window. So they've got a decision to make. Is it going to be Rashford or Walker in this window? And at the time of recording, it may change throughout the day or week, but as of now, there's nothing to suggest that Milan have made a final decision. They're spinning both plates. They've been in advanced talks with Rashford, but also Kyle Walker. And now they're going to have to pull the trigger on one of them. Then you have Dortmund, which is the most interesting club, I think, because you have that framework from the Sancho loan in place. And my understanding is that Dortmund would come to Manchester United and basically ask for exactly the same thing. And in that loan with Sancho, who of course now is at Chelsea, there was an element of gamble or risk reward from Manchester United, where they felt at base level in that loan, the wages were covered, so they weren't losing money keeping Sancho on their books and loaning him to Dortmund. And then there was a series of performance-related add-ons that kind of doubled the package. So 3 components: loan fee, the wages covered, and then anything you might get but not guaranteed. And the might get part doubled the package to somewhere around 8 million, which then made it very lucrative to Manchester United. And because Dortmund reached the Champions League final, they got many of those add-ons paid for Sancho, but actually not all of them, because even though Germany got that extra spot due to coefficients, it was top 4 in the league and Dortmund finished 5th. So they didn't get all of their Sancho money, but they got the vast proportion and they turned a profit. And that kind of resolved the situation. So Dortmund's perspective, and they're looking at other players like Renato Vega, Carney Chukwuemeka. They're in the market for a loan, maybe a loan with an option. And the likelihood is that they'll use the framework for the Sancho deal to see if anything is possible. And I'm still told that Manchester United are going to be quite flexible if, and it is an if still, Rashford leaves, because they want to find a solution for all parties. So the challenge is really, does the suitor want to commit to what is a very high wage? Is there going to be any kind of buy option or obligation? And how quickly can you get it done? And the reason it's gone a bit quiet is because on the player side, there's like a whistle-stop tour of Europe taking place, a visit to Milan, and now a second meeting there, a flight to Dortmund and meetings with them. Talks with Juventus, who are another club that we haven't mentioned. And West Ham made an inquiry as well, but they feel that Rashford will end up going outside of the Premier League. So it is a fluid situation, but I think Dortmund and Milan at the time we're recording anyway are 2 clubs still very firmly in the mix.
Yeah, like you mentioned there about the prospects of a loan, and that very much seems to be what everyone's talking about. But in terms of a permanent deal for Marcus Rashford, do you think the club have a figure in mind where that would happen, or is that too far down the line to really to say at this point?
Well, he's well contracted, so that allows the value to be protected. And I think you'd be looking at a minimum of 40 million from what I've heard. But who's to say, for example, that Manchester United don't prefer the option of a straight loan, knowing that that gets the player playing, and it also provides a chance for him to get back in the England setup. We mustn't forget a really key point regarding England, that when Thomas Tuchel was at PSG, he wanted to sign Rashford. So the England manager really likes Rashford. And it's interesting with Tuchel, because if you look at his history of managing players or wanting players, you have 2 this window that may be on the move in Marcus Rashford and Ben Chilwell. And it feels very difficult for them right now to force their way back into the England setup. But the manager changes a lot of that. And if Southgate was still there, you'd be saying Chilwell's not playing and Rashford has lost his goal-scoring touch. Both of them are going to struggle for the 2026 World Cup. Now you kind of think, if Rashford has a good 6 months or so somewhere else, his value could rise. He could get back in the England setup. Tuchel values him. It might be the same for Ben Chilwell as well. So there is some incentive there for Rashford to impress Tuchel, whether at Manchester United or whether elsewhere. And then from Manchester United's perspective, I think if someone offered 45 million now on a permanent deal and Rashford wanted it, they might accept that. But if he does well in 6 months, because he's healthily contracted, it could be a club preference to wait and see, let him play, resolve the situation that they currently have, bring him back, and then you can kind of have your cake and eat it, because he's more in demand. He's in the shop window. He might be in better goal scoring form and confidence. So you reassess him pre-season and decide if you want to bring all of that back to Manchester United, or if you actually feel that you've been able to add 7 to 10 million or even more onto the valuation because he's healthily contracted at the football club. So it may be a way of kind of raising the asset value of Rashford using a loan deal with no option that suits all parties. And that, I think, could be part of Manchester United's willingness to at least entertain the possibility of this only being a Rashford loan rather than any kind of permanence. It will all just depend on these suitors, like I say. If someone meets the valuation, nobody's ruling out a permanent exit. But right now, the feeling is a loan is more likely.
Yeah, hopefully he can have a positive loan move. I remember a few years ago when Anthony Martial went to Sevilla, and it was like that could be putting him in the shop window. He could get him playing again, get his form up, and it turned into a bit of a disaster, didn't it? I remember that move. Hopefully this one will be a lot more positive. You've spoken, I think today, or on X or Twitter, some people still call it, about Antony, about where he could go this window, if he does go at all this window. What's the latest with Antony? Because he's a player that obviously doesn't feature a lot under Ruben Amorim, or did play the second half against Southampton. What do you think the future holds for him?
Yeah, as I've reported over the last week and a little bit extra today, Real Betis are now in active talks to try and sign Antony on loan. There is Saudi interest as well, but it's not thought that Antony wants to leave Europe at this stage. And from Betis's point of view, they're not looking to buy. They're not looking for a loan with an obligation. So straight loan or possibly a loan with an option. And it would require Manchester United to either waive a loan fee or pay a significant, likely 50-50 split or majority percentage of Antony's wages. So Betis are playing on the fact that they think Manchester United wants some of the wages off the books, and they think Manchester United wants to find a solution for Antony to go out and gain more minutes. So we've heard about the Real Betis and Antony links now for the best part, I would say, of 2 weeks. But it's only in the last 24, 48 hours that Betis have actually made formal contact with both Manchester United and the player side to actively start negotiations and see whether anything is possible. So we wait and see how quickly it could advance. But Betis's belief is that Antony is available and they're specifically looking for a loan, but it will require buy-in from Manchester United to contribute to some of those wages. Otherwise, it won't be financially feasible for Betis.
Just a topic that keeps coming up, doesn't it? Manchester United's wages. It's something that obviously has been such a sticking point for so long. It speaks volumes as to what the club has done in terms of wages over the last few years in particular. I want to ask you a little bit about some incomings. Diogo Leon, what's the latest with him? I think you mentioned him. He's been in Carrington. Is that all sort of done and dusted there?
It's all done. He flew over to do the formalities and then flew back. Remember, he's 17 years of age, so he joins in the summer and then likely will be assessed, and we work out whether Manchester United are going to loan him out again or alternatively keep him within the main playing squad. But this is a deal that Jason Wilcox has driven, and Manchester United feel that he has a very big future ahead of him. So the kind of profile, I think, that will excite Manchester United fans over the course of the coming years, and a nod, I suppose, to the kind of recruitment strategy that we're starting to see being put in place, which is maybe becoming a little bit more similar to, for example, Chelsea's, where they're looking for younger profiles, they're looking to safeguard their future, they're trying to tie players down on longer term deals, they're trying to avoid what we were talking about with a player like Antony, where you get stuck with an established star that for whatever reason doesn't fit. You've paid a big outlay, and in addition to that, they're one of the higher earners in the Premier League. So, of course, they're difficult to offload, and Manchester United and Ratcliffe have got a couple of goals within recruitment between now and I would say the next 5 windows. And it's phase 1 of the project. And it's about getting the most out of the academy. It's about finding homegrown players and stars. It's about savvily recruiting from global territories where you can find a young player and integrate them. So effectively they become part of your academy or your under 23s, and then they grow into first team opportunities. And we know that Ruben Amorim has a good track record of developing young players as well. And then in doing so, the value rises. And the beauty of that is that you kind of dine off your successes and, in inverted commas, your failures. Because if a player like Leon succeeds, you've got him at a steal, and he can play left back or left wing back. He's relatively versatile. He's got a high ceiling ahead of him. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, and I would never call a footballer a failure, but if for any reason it doesn't happen for him at Manchester United, like any other player in this category, and like many of Chelsea's names, you feel like you're still going to be able to sell them and turn a profit. And therefore that money is useful because it can be reinvested into your next young talent or put towards a bigger transfer. And Manchester United's main thing, with all this cost cutting as well off the field, and with Jim Ratcliffe's 300 million in investment, which was 200 million when he first joined in dollars, and then another 100 million recently, the intent is to make sure that when you have that capital injection, it's not just subsumed within the club because it's constantly turning a loss and it's constantly having to address its debt. The idea over time, and it will take time, is to make sure that when you invest money in the football club, it goes somewhere. It's invested on infrastructure or academy or modernisation or fan engagement and ultimately players. And it might seem like a small step, and it's only the first stage, but you will notice more Manchester United going to different parts of the world and scouring for younger talent and finding value, and then knowing that they can become the next big thing. And you have that affinity because they feel all like Carrington products, even if technically not all of them are, because they join young and they burst onto the scene at Manchester United. And like I said before, if they don't, then by the time they go from 17, 18 to 2021, you still feel that you're going to be able to turn a profit on them and inject that money back into the club. So Leon is a good example of Jason Wilcox making a mark, a young profile, and in addition to that, a different sporting strategy. And it's not at the expense of this other left back, to my knowledge, that we've been speaking about for quite some time, which probably tells you that it's the long game they'll play with Leon's development rather than chucking him straight in at the beginning of next season. Because my understanding is that you'll have Leon, you've got Luke Shaw hopefully getting fit soon, and then still they want one more. And this is where the links with Milos Kirkos that I broke months ago now and is still on the radar, Nuno Mendes, who Amorim gave his debut to at Sporting. Some also even say Ryan Aït-Nouri, although at this stage I'm not able to back up there's anything more than a few internal discussions on that one, but let's see whether it develops over the coming months. So it's not just Leon. I do expect in 2025, more likely the summer now, another slightly more established but still young left back to arrive.
Exciting times. It'll be good to see what happens there. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Leon. Just finally, Ben, this January, do you see Manchester United having many incomings? Do you see us bringing anyone in? Because obviously you've been covering every story and every sort of bit of transfer news there is. We know there's areas all over the pitch perhaps that Manchester United could do with strengthening. We know there's obviously financial issues at play. Do you expect Manchester United to bring in anyone this January, or do you think it's a case of more focused on the summer?
No, it's not impossible. They've got various targets and priorities, but how many of them are going to be feasible in January remains to be seen. I'm not told that it's one out and then one in. There's a bit more flexibility with PSR because remember, you've got the first half of the summer window as well to kind of balance your books. And Manchester United will know they're going to get that obligation fee for Jadon Sancho because Chelsea only have to finish 15th or better. And that's obviously going to happen. They can put that towards the books as well. And if they can somehow get into the frame for European football, that will help too. So this isn't only a case of needing to sell. But what I would say is that there won't be panic buying either. And many of the targets Manchester United are looking at are just not available in January. But I do expect them to be opportunistic. And if, for example, Antony went out on loan and so did Marcus Rashford, then it's obvious with Mason Mount also injured and he's a versatile player that can play behind the striker too, you're going to have to add somebody in that area. Even with Ahmad on form, even with Bruno Fernandes able to chip in with goal contributions, you're lacking a little bit of either width or a versatile player that can play anywhere across the front line. Now, maybe Rasmus Højlund leads the line and Joshua Zirkzee gets an opportunity to play alongside him because he can play anywhere across the front line, but there might be room for one more. So position-wise, Number 2 goalkeeper is an interesting debate, and Binder was obviously the hero in the cup, but come the summer, his situation has a question mark. So Manchester United might have to explore a number 2 goalkeeper. I've mentioned the left back as well. I don't think the interest in Jared Branthwaite is entirely dead. And then everything further forwards beyond the number 9, which we know is a big priority, will depend on moving parts. So could Casemiro leave? And might they look to add a younger midfield profile in there, even though they've got plenty of options? Does Antony and Rashford go? In which case you may be looking for a winger or a wide forward. And the number 9 is still the big topic of conversation. But these Manchester United desires for number 9 are all not available at this stage. We know they've looked in the past at Victor Osimhen. In fact, before he joined Napoli, the overall cost of that deal, I'm told, is still too high for Manchester United. So we saw some suggestions that it might be a case of Garnacho going one way and Osimhen going the other. As far as I'm aware, nothing Napoli have suggested has factored Osimhen in as it stands at the moment. There'll be normal links with Victor Gyökeres simply because of the fact that he played under Ruben Amorim. But again, right now, you can't get the player unless you trigger the release clause. In the summer, it's far more interesting because there's a scenario whereby you have 100 million euros dropping to roughly 70 million euros, and that's a huge market opportunity. We don't know yet if Manchester United are going to formally enter that race, but certainly can't be ruled out at this stage because he's a player quite clearly that Ruben Amorim really likes. Historically, they looked at Evan Ferguson, but his form has diminished and he's injured, and that doesn't appear to be a January opportunity, for example, on a loan. And then I would still just keep in the back pocket, if you like, an eye on Ivan Toney. And that's because we know Manchester United have looked in the past. There's nothing to suggest that yet Toney's chapter in Saudi is going to come to an end. And I certainly wouldn't want to fuel the belief that Manchester United are active on it yet. But I hear from a lot of sources that come summer, or maybe even January 2026, the Toney situation is going to be one to watch because Matthias Jassel's on the way out of Al Ahly. Max Allegri is going to come in at the end of the season. Toney says he's settled for now. We should make that point very clear. But what's going to happen to Toney's England chances? What's going to happen to Al Ahly under new management? What's Toney's perspective going to be once he's done one full season in Saudi Arabia? I think there's quite a few clubs, including Manchester United, that are just keeping abreast of that in case a market opportunity emerges and Toney doesn't stay in Saudi Arabia for a long time. But just to stress finally, there's nothing yet that says definitively that Toney's unhappy, that Toney's looking to leave right now. So I don't want to mislead or get people too excited, but just keep an eye on that situation because in the next sort of 6 months or year, it might be one to watch if Toney decides that due to all the change at Al Ahly and that move to Saudi Arabia perhaps not being quite what he thought it would be, he decides that he's willing to return to England.
So that's it. Ben Jacobs exclusive. United are definitely going to sign Ivan Toney in January.
It will be taken out of context. It really will.
We're not going to do that as a title or anything like that. Don't worry. Ben, it's always a pleasure having you on the channel. It's great to chat to you as well, first time for myself. We'll be chatting to you again more, I'm sure, as more stories come out and you keep doing what you're doing. Thanks a lot for chatting to us.
Look forward to it. Keep up the good work and good luck to Manchester United in the final few days of the window.
Thanks a lot, Ben. That was Ben Jacobs, the chief reporter for Gimme Sport, chatting to us about Manchester United's transfer, whether we're going to see some players going out in the January transfer window or some coming in or in the summer as well. So make sure you are hitting like, share and subscribe. That's been Ben. I'm Jay. Thanks for watching.